So this is the first time I'm doing any type of like script reorganization. And yeah, this script is not mine. It's from Shahid Gire, and he is a compositor at MPC, and he has his own YouTube channel. So he has his own YouTube channel here, and he came out with a video recently called Intro to Deep Compositing, Full CG Deep Workflow Nuke using Deep Holdout. It's a great video, and I noticed how clean the Nuke script was. And so I reached out to Shahid and I asked him if I could borrow the script and the assets so that I could reorganize it with stamps to kind of compare an already good looking script after it is using stamps, and kind of have an honest discussion about you know, if it looks messier or if it improves readability or not. And so he was all up for it. He's used stamps before, but he was curious as well to see what it might look like with the stamped version of the script. So I highly recommend going to Shahid's YouTube channel called VFX SHOWDOWN. It actually has great videos, and I don't know how he does it, but he kicks these out like it seems 4 times a month or something like that. If you want the script and you want the assets, I am not going to be able to give those to you, but Shahid has a Patreon. I'm not sure which one of these things. I guess it would be Nuke Learning, the $6 a month, and that would give you access to download the Nuke script and the assets, which is like 55 gigabytes of deep data. And that is what I have here that he has given me permission to use and make some content about. So this is Shahid's LinkedIn. He is a compositing artist at MPC now with a few years experience, and honestly, he is a great compositor. And I can just tell by the script, the way it's organized, the types of methods that he's using. He's doing some very advanced things in here that you can't easily learn on the internet for free. So he obviously had some really good training, and he has really good workflow. So I highly recommend learning from him, taking apart his script. And yeah, hats off to you, Shahid. I think you're doing a great job. And this is by no means going to be a tutorial or a showcase saying that this script looks like shit and mine's going to look better. It's more of saying it already looks good. I think it looks fantastic. It's very readable already. And it's more to just see what kind of improvements we can get out of stamps. And also, this is using a lot of deep passes, which people are very unfamiliar with deep renders. And they're very heavy. And they cause the script to be very slow when deep is used live. So I'm just going to click on a random frame here. So you can see there's some subtle changes here, but probably that's just a difference between a tool, or maybe I accidentally turned something off. But I'm pretty satisfied with this result. I'm just going to click on a different frame so you can see how long it's taking me to load this. Yeah, okay, so here I'm going back and forth between the render, and I'll do a wipe. I think a wipe is easier. But you can see it's pretty much exactly the same. So when you're starting to refactor a script, and just to define what refactoring means coming to the same output, but changing the way that the script is doing something so that it can be faster, more readable, more optimized, etc. Same output, different way of doing it. So that is refactoring. You could say reorganizing, but refactoring specifically means that the output is remaining the same. So that's really important. You always want to be comparing to the truth of the render. In this case, to make sure you don't accidentally unplug something or screw something up while you're reorganizing your script, refactoring your script. So this is very important. We can see here some pretty good organization. You can see that there's kind of this, I'm going to call it the pipes system, the visible pipes. So you have something going vertically on the stream, and then you have these horizontal, basically the masks or the renders are going horizontally into stuff. So we have some like modules here that we can see stuff is going on, and this is sort of the branches that are being added, and then the whole thing is getting adding to the background here. I assume this is the main, I'm going to call it the spine. So this is the spine of the script, which is really great. Everything's to the left of that. And so you can see this is our ultimate background probably, and then it goes straight down to our render. Okay, so I'm going to describe an issue that I see if you were grabbing this. So I had the ability to bring in all these renders from a relative path. And what a relative path means is that the render files were downstream of the location of the script. So you can say like, I'll see if one of these read nodes says it, but you can say this is telling you where the directory of the Nuke script is, and then it's saying media and blah blah blah, wherever this missile layer was. So that's great because it means that you can kind of put your stuff in a package and then all the reads load with the Nuke script. Now, if the Nuke script was in a different place, so the renders were in a different place, you would need to go find all of these renders which would error out, and you would need to replace each one manually, or you need to see. So the very first thing that we can see with this is that I don't know how many read nodes are in here. I don't know where my sources are. And this is a problem because maybe I'll go through and I'll think that I replaced all my sources, but in fact, maybe I missed one of them, or perhaps, I just overlooked something, or something broke without me noticing. And it's because I have to what is called hunt and peck. Hunt and peck is, imagine like a chicken on the ground that's going after the grain on the ground, and it has to raise its head, so you're zooming out and you have to look for another one and then you attack, right? So this is what you have to do with these kind of things. You have to go in, find a read node, replace it, zoom out, find another read node, replace it. So ideally, we want something to be at the top of our script. And if it's at the top of the script, it's a source bin. I mean, think of After Effects or any type of editing software where you bring in all your sources, and then the timeline is your working space, and you're just dragging, and you can drag and drop as many times as you want from the source bin into the timeline, and it's essentially creating instances of those things from the bin, right? It's not bringing in a new thing. So, and why does it operate like that in After Effects and in editing softwares? Well, it's operating like that so that you have one place where you can see all of your sources, so that you can confirm, okay, everything is loaded in properly, and the sources are not loaded into the working space, because then it, again, makes it hard to find them and replace them. So we're going to create this kind of artificial bin, and I'm going to call this level 1 stamps use. So this is the most basic stamps use that you can do, and one that most people, I would say, would agree is very useful, which is if you only limit stamps to doing this, will be very beneficial, which is basically bringing up these assets to the top and then creating a stamp, a hidden input, to bring it back down to the location. So let's just go and do that, and maybe I'll speed up the video, or I'll just do it and record it, and we'll see what we get. So we're just gonna go through one by one. So here we have some sort of sunset sky. I'll go here. So I'll get rid of this. So here we have a sunset sky. Let's see if. So stamps is already, I pressed F8, that's the stamp command, and it's already giving us the name from the file path. So it's by default, I think it's giving you the last bit of the file path, the whole thing, minus the extension, right? So okay, we're gonna do that. I would recommend making this right on the spot and then plugging it into the child, and then bringing the actual read node and the anchor stamp up. And so let me just make an area here. I'm gonna call it, let's call it external assets, just to be very clear. So these are things, and maybe I'll call it a bin too. External assets bin, right? So that we can familiarize ourselves with maybe some term that we know already. So I'm gonna start doing this one by one, and we'll see a visual afterwards of how many actual things that we have in the script that we need to reconnect. How many external sources are being brought into Nuke to complete this this work file. And another thing to mention is I'm using the NoOp version of stamps. So sometimes stamps are default postage stamp, I think right now. NoOps cannot become postage stamps. And let me just find out, so you know where to change that, because it could potentially break some sort of concatenation if you're using a postage stamp. So here I'm in my stamps folder, and inside the stamps folder we have stamps.py and we have stamps.config.py. And now I want to open up stamps.config.py, and this is going to open it up. And you can do this in any text editor. I'm using Sublime. So here we have a file. It's not that big. It's 100 lines or so. And at the very bottom we have these lines here: anchor class alt and stamp class alt. So here it says NoOp. I changed it to NoOp myself, and most people don't know that they can do this, but it said postage stamp before, like this. It said it like that, and that's the name of a postage stamp class. So I'll just show you. So if you go to postage stamp and then I click I, it tells me that the class is called postage stamp. So that is what you would see if you installed stamps by default. You see here where it says NoOp, we can just copy that and then double click on the postage stamp and then replace it, right? And then save the script. And now the stamps, which are these things, will come in by default, will be NoOps and not postage stamps. So I just want to make that clear that I'm using that just out of the safety of not breaking any type of concatenation, which is the transformations that are stacking on each other and calculating once. So that is what you should do if you want to be extra safe with the stamps and you don't mind never having a postage stamp little icon for the visibility. Okay, so we'll keep going. Let's see if I can find anything in here. What's this? Yep, we have so this is the stuff that becomes very confusing because I wasn't sure if that was a constant. When I'm out here, all my text goes away, right? So all I can see is the color of the nodes. So this to me looked like a constant, but when you zoom in, and you can see that it's actually a read node, and it's some sort of alpha mat, which is fine. We're just gonna bring that up. This is the pre-comp that I had to make. I'm gonna leave that in because it's supposed to be connected. So I'm gonna use a switch node, and the switch node is gonna tell me that I'm connected to the actual pre-comp, and when I turn the switch off, it's gonna go up and tell me that I'm connected to the rest of the branch. You see that the rest of the Nuke script is lighting up now. So depending on the state of that switch, it's telling me that I'm pointing to the pre-comp or pointing to the script above it, okay? And that's a nice visual to see what I'm actually loading in the script. I see here a deep render. So that's my explosion layer deep render. So we're gonna make a deep. I like to name these deep as well when they are. So it just gives a little differentiator between the other explosion layer. So I'm gonna bring this up. So you want to keep these close together. So if you got a new render of an explosion, you'd have the new deep. And then you'd be able to switch them both out right away. Here's the pre-comp for the sky, which is fine. We should not bring pre-comps up to the top. So when you see a pre-comp like this where it's switching between the two, and by the way, I always try to do this. This is a little trick. If you set the switch to 1, when you disable the switch, it goes back and forth. So if you have it set to 0, you need to manually, like it's gonna go to 0 every time, right? So you have to actually switch it yourself. So set it to 1, and then when you disable it, it's gonna go back and forth. So that's a little trick there. So we could re-enable this thing if we wanted to, but let's just leave it like it is because that was in there by default. Let's go down here. We see our merge node here. We have some spot flares, some heat distortions, some camera shake. Here is some lens dort. So that is a read node and an asset. So let's bring that up. So yeah, I disabled all the vector blurs and I disabled some of the X nodes which were eating up my GPU, but I can enable them later. But just to show, it's still producing the same result, just a little bit of like missing some vector blur that I disabled. But yeah, the whole script now is using stamps. So wherever the read nodes and the camera nodes and the deep nodes were in the script, they are now all sourcing from the top bin. And I've organized this bin a little bit, but you can see these were all of the nodes that were used in the script. And if you want to see where it was used, you can go up here and you can click select. And you can see that it was plugged in there, right? So by default in stamps, there is no hotkey to actually do this select button. You have to do it manually, or if you're in the child, for example, you click on select similar. So it's selecting all of the instances and the parent, so it's showing the connections, right? But if you have Shortcut Editor installed, it's really easy to assign this hotkey yourself. Shortcut Editor is such an amazing tool. It's on Nukepedia and it's made by Ben Dixon. And it's basically like a panel where you can go and search for hotkeys and assign hotkeys. And it's super useful if you're trying to customize your UI and your workflow for yourself. So if you do have that Shortcut Editor installed, which would be found in Edit and then Edit Keyboard Shortcuts here, when you click that, it's going to show up with this little Shortcut Editor panel. And basically on the left side is where you can type a key in. And you can click clear, and in here you can search by text. And one of the little tricks with this thing is that what you're searching for is anything that's in a menu. All of these menu options show up as a command that you can make a shortcut for. And so a little known thing, I guess, about stamps, in the edit menu there's actually a stamps submenu, and here we have access to some of the commands that is on stamps. And here we can actually find the selected, and then under that you can say select similar. So if we go back to our shortcut editor and we say edit keyboard shortcuts, we can actually search for stamps, and then we can find select similar, which is right there. And here I think at Trickster it's a Z, so Z happened to be free, and you can double check that by deleting this, and I can just click Z. And you can see it's the only command that's using that hotkey. So if there's two commands, there's a bit of conflict and it doesn't know which one to use. But yeah, just Z happened to be free, and that's the one we use. Plus, it's really, I mean, close to your hand when you're on the keyboard. And so essentially, if I have this selected and I click Z, it's gonna select all of my children, which is really good for just kind of casually going through the script and investigating where things are. And if you have a child selected and click Z, it also just selects everything. So it's selecting all of the instances and the parent and all the children of that stamp. So I think assigning that hotkey would definitely make workflows a bit faster in troubleshooting, you know, like where is this going, and kind of you can select all of them and make life a little bit easier for you. So you can make a hotkey out of that, but yeah, we're just gonna click select here. Yeah, and we'll see exactly where it is. Or you can click Control A, and you can kind of see where things are going, generally speaking. Just selecting everything and seeing, okay, well, this camera went there, and you can see some of that stuff. But the way to see where exactly things went, like this ocean mat, we would select it, and it went there, and we can see exactly where it went in the script, which is really useful. So we're not missing where the things belonged in the actual work file. So that is what I would call, that is level 1 stamps. We've replaced all of our inputs, and the structure of the script has not changed at all, but we've gained some readability. The exact readability that we've gained is that we have a single place at the top of our script that tells us where all the inputs are. That makes troubleshooting inputs, replacing renders, investigating whether or not you have the correct passes already in your script. That makes all of those things much easier to do. Much easier to swap it out, much easier to make sure that it was being used, or it's propagating into the right places. So that's it can be a nice organized way to keep all this stuff the same way that maybe After Effects has a bin, or Premiere Pro has a bin, or DaVinci Resolve. All these things have bins that then you're making instances of that input in other places in your work file. Okay, so that's what we've done. And the only messiness is when you select it all, you can see that they're going up to that bin. But you're not supposed to select it. I mean, you're supposed to be able to tell where it came from, right? But it's similar to the expression node, where you can turn it off and turn it on. You're not explicitly trying to see where everything's coming from all the time, because it's more similar to copying the read nodes around than it is to having an actual pipe, right? So you don't want to see where it comes from all the time because you can just read it. It says missile layer, and up here, the only one that says missile layer is this one. So I know that it came from there. Okay, so we have the level 1 stamps done, and some people would just want to stop here, right? This is the most amount of stamping that they would want to do, is just to replace everything at the top with the sources and then have it go. But what we have now is now it doesn't really make too much sense to have all these pipes everywhere, because we have the stamp. It's already being piped from the top. So we have the ability now to shorten a lot of these pipes and make it look a little bit less square. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through and I'm going to shorten these pipes. So for example, here it says depth, and I can just put this stamp really close to it, right? So I'm still getting the same readability. Has the depth here. And then I'm going to follow this through, and wherever the ends of that thing was, I'm going to replace. So I'm going to bring this one closer here, right? And then this one had ocean depth, so you can see I'm sort of cleaning up where these were, and I'm going to make them closer to where they were belonging in the actual working space. Okay, so let's just keep going with this. You see, when we're zoomed in, we're not getting that readability. So we would have to follow this pipe all the way down just to see that it was connected to that ocean depth render. Whereas now, if we're worrying a little bit less about those pipes, we can see deeper color, ocean deep here, and we can be zoomed in at this very high level here. So we're very close, and we can still see, oh, this went to the ocean depth. Right? And it says it on the stamp, of course, it says it on the name, but we can also just trace it back. And so this is starting to gain some readability when we're at this zoom level, which is very important. You see, I'm basically getting rid of some of these pipes. And I can see that this pipe on the side is just there as kind of, just in case you want to use the camera at some point, right? But we don't need the camera to be all the way on the side anymore, because we don't need to pipe it in all the way horizontally. In fact, it's being used over here. We can simply just have the camera plugged in. We can still leave this backdrop if we want, but we can still just have the camera plugged in there, and we can see, oh, it went to the camera. Camera's right there. Boom. So we don't need it to go across and create a box along our script anymore. We can just place it exactly where it's needed, and then we're clearing up some readability. Now this is becoming clear that it's more like an asset. So it's okay that they get split apart. I'm not too worried about any of this stuff. Although, oof, that was a there was a hidden input there. So I'm not a fan of other hidden inputs besides stamps. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this over here, and I'm going to unhide that. So I'm going to unhide that, and we're just going to gain a little bit of visibility there. See, I'm sort of following the pipes to their natural endings here. So here we have a decision to make here. After we were cleaning some of this up, we have this pipe that is being brought out, which is using these two. Now, I could make this pipe, right? There's nothing really stopping me because it's just a merge combine. We're not really gaining much from having a pipe except locking us in. I could just copy this over here and plug it into where it was needed. I'm still getting the readability, right? I'm still getting, here's my explosion layer combined with my ocean deep, and it's being used as a deep holdout. So I don't need that line that's going way out there. And I can continue to, this one just looks like all of the deeps that are combined. So I can just keep bringing that down. I'll make it a little bit more readable. Okay, I'm pretty satisfied with this now. I've shortened down the different pipes down to where they were actually being used, and then I duplicated them where needed. So the first thing is that we have a little bit more readability, I think, which is that these branches are starting to become more clear, right? They're like the ends of these, when you have this selected here, the ends of these are much clearer. Like this goes up to the top and then this went somewhere else. If we want to know where it went, it goes all the way up to where it's seeing it. But when we have our tree selected, we can see that this is a layer. This is a layer here. This is another layer. These are another layer. This is another layer. And then finally, that big chunk that I have pre-rendered is a layer. We can see what that looks like if I disable that. But yeah. But we're also seeing that things are being kind of piped around still. So maybe you could call this level 2 stamps. And level 2 stamps was that we replaced all of the tops of the pipes with the stamps that go to the bin, go to the asset management area. And instead of having the pipes that went everywhere, we just put a stamp exactly where it was being used in that spot. So whenever the deep was being used, we copied and pasted it. And we can double check that. We still have some readability. So let's just say, where was this used here? Select. So it was used in a couple places. So now we're seeing exactly the places where it was used, where I duplicated it. Instead of having a pipe, I duplicated to exactly where it was needed. Yeah, so we can see I guess you could say that the ends, so where they were being used, is a little bit more defined. So it's telling you exactly where they went. It is consolidating, duplicating the sources and not relying on the pipes to take you to like have a stamp somewhere and then having pipes to take you other places. It's duplicating the stamps around to where they were needed in that specific spot. So we're gonna move on to level 3 because I can see that there's a bunch of pipes here, and we're gonna see this, right? So if we zoom in here, I've lost a lot of readability here because, for example, this goes off the screen. This goes off the screen. I don't know where those went. When I'm at this zoom level here, I don't know where exactly those things went if I'm over here. So that is a tiny bit bothersome. Now I have it when I'm going here, but not everything is clear. I don't know where this goes until I zoom all the way out. So I would like to, for example, I don't know what this is. It goes up to somewhere, but I would need to go up and then chase it, right? So my goal would be to gain a little bit of visibility, like within these places where they're being used back and forth. A really good example would be this one, where it's using this asset and it's going all the way across and being used here. And I think we could gain some visibility if we named it something and then we brought it over here, right? I think we could gain a little bit of visibility and then we could move this one around because basically this one has to be here or else that guy gets angry, right? So we have to structure our comp in a certain way so that the rest of it is still being readable, and that locks us in a little bit to how we need to organize it because things need to be straight lines going horizontally across. So my goal is to alleviate a little bit of that. So I'm going to try to make each of these branches, each of these modules, if you will, look independent, and they're going to look like they're standalone. So I'm going to try to alleviate some of these pipes that are being reused a lot of places. And if you can see, the spine of the script has things that are outgoing from the spine. And the reason that it has things that are going out from the spine is because we're storing information. We're either grabbing the sky or something that the sky was carrying. So we're going to try to not do that. And instead, the first thing I'm going to do, so after this sky, we're going to make a stamp here. And we're just going to call it sky background. And so instead of the places, I can see this, nothing is in between here. And I'm just going to grab that and pull it out. So I can just double check. So this is indeed the sky. These are the same. So I'm just going to switch it out. And I'm going to do this here. Right. And here's another thing that's going on. I can see some processes here. And from here on, this is being used in a lot of places. So I can see that this is being used multiple places after this. So what I might do is this is being used maybe as a reflection or something. I'm not really sure, but let's just say it's being used as a reflection for the water. So we're gonna say sky reflect, maybe. I see. So this is probably flipping the sky upside down. Yes, it is. And we're going to blur it. Cool. And then we're having some sort of animation here that's going on, which is fine because it's global, because it was being used in multiple places. So we're gonna call this sky background and sky reflect. And maybe we can make something called like outgoing or something. So I'm going to continue to bring this one places that I know that I'm using it. So in this case, this is also grabbing the sky. So I'm gonna bring this over all the way down here. So we're using our sky right here. And all this area is using our sky, which is great. Up here, we're gonna take our sky reflect, and we're just gonna put it wherever we see this being used. So here, I think it's being used right there. So it's being added to a lot of different places. And now we can get rid of this pipe. We can get rid of this one because it's not doing anything. So now we can see that the sky reflect has gone into these places over here. We have this coming from this asset here, which is our explosion. So our explosion is doing something here. It looks like a bit of a Luma key or something is going on. It looks like the flames of the explosion are being isolated, and then they're being brought to other places across. So what I might do here is I might say put a dot. I'll say like explosion flames. So we know that this is being used in other places. So I always like to put this off to the side here. You can plug it in, but just for the sake of clarity, I'm going to put it there. So I can see that it's being used right here. And I can also see that it's being used all the way over here. So I'm going to give this a little bit of breathing room here. And now I've freed this area up. I've freed this area up a little bit so I can kind of consolidate a little bit. And now this whole thing, I can be a little closer together, maybe. But this whole thing doesn't need to be here anymore because we've disconnected those pipes. So let's bring it down to this area. And we can see this is being merged over right there. And it's also being used here in this grade. And this grade, I think it's using the smoke. Yes, it's using the smoke alpha to grade it. But it is going on this part of the tree here. It's going with the rest of the CG. So what we could also do, perhaps, is at the very end of our branch here, we could call this explosion smoke. We just call it explosion. Explosion comp is probably a good way to describe it. So this is our explosion comp, and I'm going to put that at the end. And this is a rule of stamps. So you saw that the stamp came in like this. Never disconnect it if it's intended to be plugged in like this. So never break that connection like so. We don't want to do that. Because it might cause confusion of where, if this is going somewhere else, it might cause some confusion. So always either plug it in, or what I also like to do is just leave it to the side a little bit. Leave it to the side a little bit. You can make a dot if you want to make the reading it a little bit clearer. But this is my explosion comp, and I'm not going to plug it in there. I want to know that this is where it plugs into my main branch. I want to know that it plugs in there. What I don't want is I don't want to see that it goes somewhere else and it's going across my script and it's limiting my flexibility to move it. So I know that this is coming from my explosion. So I'm gonna put it there, and since this is a mask, I'll even put it on this side. So this should be a little bit clearer. It's a grade node with a mask coming from my explosion comp, and as soon as I select it, it's telling me where it's going. And what this allows me to do is maybe even bring this a little bit closer. Maybe spread this out a little bit. I'll separate this a tiny bit out so things are not so cluttered. So now I can see that this is this branch is becoming a little bit more defined here. And here, the same thing's going on. I would not make a stamp for this. This is very clear. It's being used in the same pipe. There's really not much unclarity here. So I would never make a stamp on this dot to hide this mask. It's very clear that it's being used as a multiplier right next to the area that it should be. So there's no problem. In fact, I would probably do something like this since it doesn't affect where this is. So I would put these even closer like this. And probably, yeah, maybe I'll leave it there, but I would just have some clarity there, so it wasn't looking like I needed to go behind that inject mat. This is just injecting alpha into fire underscore smoke, which is great. And yeah, I don't think it needed to be plugged in before that, so I'm just gonna keep this nice and tidy so you can see that these operations go together. I want to be able to select my branches like really clearly here. And now you see this is disconnected a little bit from, it's not reading from the sky anymore. So it doesn't need to be so close. So you can make it over here perhaps. I'm gonna try not to break the visibility of this, but there is one little trick that we can do that I think might increase the readability a tiny bit. And still have all the pipes kind of not worrying me too much. So I'm gonna move this down. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna move this as if it's another branch. It is another branch. But instead of making it connected, I'm going to do this. Now this is set to all, I believe. Yes. So I'm gonna make this connected to a reformat. And hopefully this is set to, yeah, it's set to the script. So what I'm going to do, if I set this to none, should be fine there. So I'm going to plug this in as if it's a branch on something else. So I'm going to plug this in as if it's its own branch coming in and plugging into another spine. Okay, so I've reorganized this a little bit. So that everything was a branch coming in, and this is just a little trick that it starts with nothing at all, and it basically sets your format, right? So you have a reformat, you could have a constant here, if it's set to the format that you're wanting to, and you're literally adding things, even the first thing up, and what that allows you to do is kind of disable that for later. So if I wanted to see just my smoke without the ocean, I could do that, right? So it's just a little extra thing in case your ocean is very heavy and you don't really need to look at that right now. It could be the case that you just want to disable that. And I think visually it makes it a little clearer. All of these are modules. The things that I'm selecting here, they're all modules. And I can draw a box around each of them. And each of those are coming into the main spine. And this is not the actual spine. This is, I guess, my CG spine, because this is the actual spine of my script, which gets merged all together at once. Now, I will note one thing. With things like light wrap, I don't like to make a stamp to go into the light wrap like this. I actually like to leave this little line coming from the main spine. And the reason is exactly what's in this script here, which was that we were using a grade. Right here. So I don't want to make an extra stamp. I want to know that the light wrap was using as close to the bottom of where it's being merged as it can. Basically, there's not much in between where it came from and the merge, and that's on purpose. If I was using a stamp, say I was using the sky stamp here. Just gonna make a child here, and I'm gonna go down. The problem with this is that I don't really know right away where it's coming from, or if it's okay. And I assume because it was plugged in at the bottom there that we do want it, the light wrap, to contain that grade that has this explosion in it. So I don't want to have to select it. I just want to know that it came from the bottom. So I'm just gonna Z back. So I want to actually see that visual indication, and this creates a little loop. It's like I'm using the background to influence my my tree at close to the bottom where it's being merged on, and it creates this little circle here, and it's making a visual connection saying I'm using as close to this merge as I can, and it's not going somewhere else where I might be missing an asset. So in this case, I do like to keep it there because it's very close to that merge, and they kind of go together. They kind of make a little bit of a loop here. So I do like to keep that in there. So the main part is that we are slowly modularizing this thing. So we're making all of these things into areas that we can and should pre-comp, which I think they already do have like render nodes here. But it's making a little bit more visual, like here's my background to foreground, and it's being slowly built up. And then everything's getting merged over the sky later on. Now I'm purposely not making backdrops here yet because I want to show you that the script is still pretty readable without the backdrops. Something that's going on right here that I'm not a big fan of is that I did pre-comp this up here, but this grade is accessing something from the CG render. And we already pre-comped it, and that is not a good thing. We don't want to be using things that are live after we have already pre-comped it, because the point of the pre-comp is to reduce the amount of channels, the things that we're taking with us, and only keep what we need, right? So I would have made this this grade up here before the right node, and I don't know if I can do that because it might change something. I hope it doesn't change something. I don't exactly know what it's doing actually. We can find out. So it's brightening this thing up. So I can just do a quick test, see if it actually gives me close to the same result here. So I'm just gonna go up here and do it. I'll do it on the render. So it seems like it's giving me a very similar result if I do it here or at the bottom. So I don't see any reason why it would have been needed to do there, except if it was maybe an afterthought, or we want to quickly do it. So what I would have done, or what I will do, is I'm gonna bring this up here, and I'm going to bring this down, and I'm gonna go ahead and make that part of the actual pre-comp, and I'm going to rerun this pre-comp so that it includes that mask with it already baked in. So I'm gonna include it there because I do think it was needed. And let's just say that this is something that needed to be animated, and maybe that was the reason why it was left live, so it could be played with afterwards. So we're gonna do something else. This node here is using the P, so it's using the position pass. So actually, this is something that we're going to want to keep, and instead of keeping all that, we're going to keep the position pass. We're going to bring that with us so that we can do this later. So I'm going to take this. I'm going to set these to none. I'm going to go here and click the position pass, and now I have my position pass, and now I'm going to re-render this with the position pass, and instead of going up to the top of the render, I'm gonna source from my pre-comp like this. So I'm gonna source it from my pre-comp, and what that's gonna allow me to do is no longer access that CG render, but I still have access to that position pass, so that I can still do these animated things live. Because maybe that was something that needed to be adjusted and want it to be look dev while not having the stress of all this stuff above it. So that's reasonable, and we're gonna do that right now. Okay, so that render is finished, and you can see here what I've done. You see this little green others channels indicator. That what I've done is I've included the P, X, Y, and Z in the render, and so it should look pretty much the same. And I'm going to swap these out now and just call it version 2. And so this is still going to be accessing that part of the wave from the P of our pre-render, but that means that it doesn't access the rest of the first of all the very large CG render. So it's only accessing the very small pre-comp that only has a few channels in it. So that's very big on the network, and also it just makes it clear that the rest of the script is no longer being used. So it ends at that pre-comp, and it still gives me the flexibility, or whoever is doing the script, to go ahead and manipulate this grade and you know, do whatever they need to do in order to finish the shot. And you know, if they're manipulating how much the wave needs to get brighter and all that stuff. So we've maintained flexibility. We've cut off the rest of the script. So let's just say, for example, I needed to send this script, then maybe I only need to send this pre-comp instead of the actual CG render of the ocean, because it's all color corrected and stuff here and pre-rendered. So just saving ourselves a little bit of packaging for later, perhaps, if we were to deliver the script, reducing the file sizes down. So this might be considered level 3, and I haven't added any backdrops or anything, but we can still see all of these regions here that are now independent, and all these branches that are going into a main kind of CG branch, and then that is going into the main spine with our background down to our render, hiding a bit of the dependencies so that it seems like independent assets, although when you select it, you can clearly still see that it has dependencies other places in the script. But this is freeing us up so we can make decisions like layering, or we can move this off to the side. We could even copy and paste this now. So if I paste this minus the clone stamps there, I still should get the same result. So I have a little bit of freedom to maybe I'm doing an experimental thing, and I'm just okay. Let me just copy paste this over here. I'm not worrying about those outputs. I know those clone stamps are looking funny, but I'll just hide those for now. But it's allowing me to kind of play around, and now maybe I'll bring this over here. Maybe the ocean, maybe there's a lightning strike and it needs for some reason to look a certain way, and the look of the lightning strike makes the ocean look a completely different way. And instead of trying to like animate color corrections, I just make a lightning version of the ocean, for example, and perhaps I have a switch node or dissolve, and it's going between the two ocean comps, so it's kind of like dissolving between them, flashing or so. And you could do something like that, just easily copy paste it, make your own setup for that scenario, and then we're kind of dissolving back and forth. That's just an example of the fact that we're free now. That yes, the dependencies are still there. I didn't add dependencies. They were there. They were there regardless. So those pipes are going from the sky, for example, or from that other asset, and they were coming in. So I didn't change the dependencies, but what I did was I freed us up, so we have a little bit of freedom to go somewhere else, do something if we want to like, experiment, play around. We can experiment with different parts of the script. So. For me, that's a big win in flexibility. It's a big win in being able to move parts of your script around and not be locked into this kind of box that we've made. I guess step 4 for me, it's like a mini step, but step 4 for me is these modules. In my opinion, some people don't like backdrops, but when you're using stamps, I think it's kind of necessary to know where a module ends and begins. And by module, I'm meaning it's self-contained. After that pre-comp render, I could delete it from the script. You want things to be interacting within that module, so you have a sort of bounds. Imagine I took this and I turned it into a group. The group can have multiple inputs, so it can have many different inputs, but it can only have one output. And a group is a module. So it's self-contained and it's giving you one output. The same way that this is giving us an output with this render here. So that is kind of a module. And I guess step 4, which is a little minor step, step 3.5 or step 4, would be to give this more clarity in general in the script. And so this was our ocean. So I'm just gonna give it some clarity here, and I want this to be before my precomp. So I want my precomp to be above it, so that I could delete that and I would still have my precomp. So I don't want the precomp to be inside of the backdrop, because that's implying that I could make it a group or delete it. And that would make a group out of my precomp, which I don't want, right? So this is the output, and then it gets pre-rendered. So this is an overview now of the script with some basic backdrops, which I'm calling in this case like modules. In my opinion, it makes the containers of those areas, those branches, very readable. So I know exactly, okay, all this belongs together, all of this belongs together, all of this belongs together, and so on. And to me, everything has its own container. And it's not just a label, but it's like a container. And I know people are saying, you know, I like to work with freedom. I don't think it's that hard to grab one of these things and just kind of drag it along, so you can expand it. But it's just good to set the bounds of things. And in a funny way, the entire, if you're thinking about these module systems, which is a lot of inputs going into an output, possibly exploding out, right? That is kind of what our whole Nuke script is. Our whole Nuke script is we bring a bunch of stuff in, and then we combine it, and at the very, very end, we shuffle everything in that we need to export, and then we write out one thing. So the entire Nuke script is a module, and sections of the Nuke script are modules as well. So basically, I would argue that everything before this camera shake is a module, because you want to camera shake everything. So you would be funneling everything to this one point if I have any mats. So this is the kind of the funneling effect, the hourglass, or however you want to call it, the bow tie. This is essentially what we're doing. We're doing this over and over again within modules as the whole Nuke script, a part of the Nuke script. So this is exactly what's happening here. We're funneling everything together, and then we're doing something. And it still has, at the end of this, it still has things that you can shuffle out. So for example, this fire. And so you can explode it the way that this is representing here. So you can pull them out again and explode them out. So yeah, that's just a little example of this kind of module system. I don't want to forget this one. This can be very hard to see from a very high level up. So, and also it doesn't really need to be put there. I would say that I would probably clear this out and put it like right there, so that when I'm looking at the spot where the light wrap is being done, you can see that it's been modified close to it and not just way up here. You could put it up there, I suppose, but putting it in the middle, I think it's hard to see it. And I even would include a backdrop that says like darken smoke. And we'll just leave that in there. So this is being referenced over here, and this is part of my explosion. If I look at it, I can see the explosion comp, so I can tell, okay, this is the thing that's being referenced over in that other part. And again, I can just go here, click select, and we can see where it's being used. So you might be tempted to bring this closer like that, but I would actually argue it's better to have it up way up top like this, because it's signifying that it's the background. It's up at the very, very top of the script. So I think that'd be a good place to keep it, and just have this really long spine that goes all the way down. So I'm pretty satisfied with this script. We have our assets at the top. It's all flowing down. The next thing I'm going to do is try to alleviate what's happening with this live deep. The live deep is really killing the mobility of the script. It's not offering us pretty much anything, because we can calculate the deep one time and pre-render that. And then we're working only in 2D and not having this live deep. And we can convert the script into a completely 2D script, which will truly alleviate any of this deep stuff. So we're using deep to create 2D mats, pre-rendering that, and then reading that back in, and using those holdouts to have correct layering. So let's see how we can do that. There's some things that are being changed in the deeps, which we're going to have to migrate up to where the deeps are being combined at the very top here. For example, I noticed that this explosion layer down where the explosion was happening here has a grade node with an alpha change, and that alpha change is 0.96. So if we take that and we're going to migrate that up here, so that this alpha change is here. I think it was adding, yeah, it's like kind of filling it. There's some weird holes in this alpha channel. If you kind of like gamma this down, there's some kind of weird holes here. So that's gonna be problematic. So I think this was made to solve that kind of issue there. And we're gonna have to find some of those. I found another one, which was this missile layer, which had this little roto shape that was kind of killing this part where it was connecting to the ocean, and it's right there. So I'm actually gonna migrate that up, because that might affect how the other deeps are coming, or like how they are coming in. Now I noticed that these are just duplicate read nodes. So we already have the read nodes once in our script, and we don't want to ever duplicate them anywhere besides that one place after this. So I'm just gonna go ahead and use stamps for this part. It's correct that you just kind of can plug all these in, because they don't have a layer order necessarily until you plug them all in and find out what the layer order is, because maybe a splash is behind a smoke or in front of the smoke, and it's not like behind or in front until you actually combine it all, right? So here's my little mini deep comp, right? And that's gonna be the only thing that I'm gonna need deep wise. And after this, I'm gonna be able to render this out. And I'm gonna click create directories and make sure to put all. We're gonna definitely need all channels. Now after the deep to image, I'm gonna want to remove. Gonna want to remove any deep, because that might be a layer that I don't really need anymore. And this is carrying a bunch of layers that we don't need anymore. We don't need any of this stuff anymore. So part of this workflow is going to be replacing these Nuke default deep recolors with deep recolor from the Nuke Survival Toolkit, which is deep recolor matte. It's gonna do two things. I'm gonna replace that, and I'm gonna swap that, I guess. So first of all, I'll grab the title and inject. That's grabbing the title from the stamp. It's another benefit of stamps. But we're grabbing the title, and we're just gonna do that to every single one of these. So I don't know why the colors get mixed up, but grab title, inject. So what it's doing is it's grabbing the alpha channel from the color input. It's killing all of the channels. So see how we have all these channels here? We don't need any of that stuff anymore. So we're only keeping the deep data and the RGBA and the layer name that we have here. So we're killing all the other channels and only bringing an alpha channel, one channel that's called, well, the name of the pass, .red. We've changed the alpha here. So if we look at this deep recolor, if we don't click that, we get the alpha from the deep. Actually, we don't get the alpha from the color input. So if you say target input alpha, it grabs the alpha from the color input there, as you can see. So we need to have that checked on. So that's really important to check that box there. And we're gonna grab title. Anytime you don't need to do the target input alpha, I would suggest not selecting that. I would limit it to the times that you do need to, because it might give you some subtle errors or something if you don't. It's better to grab the deep alpha than it is to grab the color alpha in many cases. So okay, so they're all now reconnected with these deep recolor mats, which is again taking the alpha channel from the color and putting it into a single channel that's named the same thing, .red. So why have we wasted our time to do all this? The answer is, after we do our deep combine, we have a list now. So we have an alpha channel that's corresponding. This is the holdout for each thing, which is pretty cool. So these are the alpha channels that are affecting all of our layers here. So they're all held out by each other, and it's giving you the final result of what is visible after all the other things are holding it out. We just have to double check that this is creating the same result. And by double checking that, we basically need to check that we weren't doing other things to the alpha. Like we have the switch here, which we do have up there, so that's corresponding. Another thing that I could do, that I could check against, is this is giving us a result. This is giving us a result here. And you see the limited amount of channels that I have? That's all just single layer channels. So it's not red, green, blue alpha. It is just explosion.red, missile smoke.red, vehicle layer.red. So 4 of these equal just one more layer, right? So one more channel layer, however you want to name that. But it makes it very, very light in file size. It still takes a while to render because you're rendering more than just RGBA for the deep, but it's going to significantly reduce our file size and render time and processing time when we go and render this out. So one thing that we probably should check it against is our output of our comp to make sure it's looking kind of the same. So we're just going to go with this. We'll say that this is correct and this is our ground truth. I'm pretty satisfied with how it is being layered and that it's doing all the things that we were doing in the comp. So what we're interested in is all this stuff. We're interested in all of these mats here. And hopefully when we use those mats everywhere else, we're going to get the proper result. So I'm going to go ahead and render this out, and we're going to then escape from the deep world. We're going to go away from the deep world, and then every single thing in our comp is going to be 2D after this point. So this is our deep combine. In fact, I'm going to name this up here. I'm going to name it. It's now our, it was a slap comp. It still kind of is. It's called our deep combined. So we're gonna do that, and I'll just go ahead and render this out, and then we'll see how it is. Okay, so we have our pre-render now of this deep combine, and we can play that back so we can see. So it's acting as our slap comp for sure. So here we have it playing back. So things that this deep pre-render now give us is number one, a ground truth of the layering. So all the deep was combined together, and this is the result of all that deep layering. So that's really important because if there's a problem in comp, we can refer to this to see if that was actually the truth of how the deep was interpreted to be layered just by combining everything together. So it's our ground truth and our slap comp in this case. The second thing we get is a puzzle piece of interconnected mats. So when you render each holdout separately, there's a chance that you might mess one thing up or forget to re-render one of them or something. And this is a container containing all of the mats that are connected with each other. And you know that it's perfectly aligned because one thing held out another thing that held out the other thing, and everything is adding up to one, which means all of our alphas are like puzzle pieces that all add up back to be a full mat for what we need. The third thing is that this is one render and not a bunch of multiple renders, so it's one container, and that container is containing all of our mat channels. So if I pause this and I go here, now I have a mat for each of these objects. So here we go. Here's an alpha channel here. Here's the water, and here's the ocean. So it's containing all of my alpha channels now for everything. So that's one container with all of our holdout mats. And the fourth thing is that we have rasterized the deep into 2D. That means that we've taken all this deep information and we've done a deep to image, and we're only keeping 2D information, which is much faster to load in because it's a much smaller file size. So we have gone away from the deep world, and we're now with all of our holdout mats back in the 2D world, which means that we can convert our entire comp into 2D, and the only place in the whole comp that we actually need our deep is this little area where we're messing with the layering. So for example, if I needed to go back and adjust this mat or replace a render, we would make it live again, do our changes, and then pre-render, and then the rest of our comp would then, after the pre-render, be only in 2D. It's existing only in 2D. Of course, you could make it live at any point by just plugging that in, and then it's live again. But that's the goal of this setup. One render to rule them all of the deep, and then we need to basically take this result with this container with all of our holdout mats. We need to propagate that all the places that we were using live deep. And so we're only interested in the alpha channel holdout mat that is associated with that branch or that layer or that asset. And we're going to pull that out, that alpha channel, and we're going to use it instead of doing a live deep combination on each branch, on each asset, because that is heavy calculation basically, and that's what's slowing the comp down. So let's use stamps for this because it's going to be very, very easy to pull this around. So I'm going to call this Deep Combine Mats. I'll just call it Deep Combine. So this is our Deep Combine, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to now go find where I need it. So this is my ocean. Here we have our ocean, and I'm just going to move this to the side for right now. And I'm going to do an unpremult, all channels. I'm going to shuffle in, or copy in rather, our alpha channel, now associated with the ocean. And then I'm going to premult all the channels. So I've made this little sandwich here. So I'm pulling out the ocean layer, and now I've replaced the alpha. So I've made a big hole, you can see. And don't worry, this is all going to be puzzle pieced together. It's going to be puzzle pieced together with everything else in our scene. So we don't have to worry that there's a hole in there now. We're going to go ahead and take care of that. So another really important thing is that we need to switch all of these to disjoint overs. But here, I'm going to just copy this whole deep setup here. So this is our explosion. We're going to go here to explosion. So we have this guy here, and now that means we can avoid some of this. Okay, so we're avoiding our deep, and we just have the alpha channel here. If you can see, that is what's causing our layering here. So I'm going to go here, I'm going to switch this to disjoint over. And the disjoint over, it needs all of the layers, and then it will fill in any of the edge holes or anything that we're doing. So I'm just trusting this. If we go to the alpha, this should be perfect, although it seems like it's not, which is a big problem. Yeah, you actually cannot blur it. You have to, if you were to blur it, you would have to do the blurs. This is the problem with deep. You can't blur that because the alpha is set. You can't blur the alpha, so you would have to do something like this, which is blurring the inside of it, but the alpha is not going to change. So this is what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to take this blur and put it there and blur the inside of it, and that's just how we're going to have to do it, because the alpha is predefined. You can't blur the alpha after it's already been defined. So we want to definitely make sure that this is on disjoint over. When it crosses it, everything works. You see that? It fits in perfectly with where it was supposed to be. Now we're gonna have to do any type of blurs or anything afterwards. So basically the entire thing, any Z to focus or anything. You cannot change the relationship between the alphas. There are puzzle pieces. You can't change one puzzle piece edge and not the other one. So you kind of have to do everything all at once or together, or not do it at all in a kind of way. That's very essential when you're doing deep, is to make sure that it's disjoint over, which will make all the puzzle pieces fit together on the edges. You need all of the puzzle pieces, or else you'll end up getting a hole. See, we're missing some passes and we're seeing a hole. So we need to continue to build this out. So now we have this should be our last one, and you'll see if we put this to disjoint over, everything fit in perfectly. So we've now recreated, there's no holes. We've now recreated our alpha. All of our puzzle pieces are now perfectly in place, and this should be, besides the color corrections, should be a one-to-one match. Should be a one-to-one layering match with what we had here. And it does, it looks very similar. And then this gets merged over the sky. In this case, this is not a disjoint over, because all of our disjoint overs the puzzle has been completed, and now it's one thing, it's one asset, basically all the CG combined together. And now we just treat it as an over, a regular over, right? Because the sky is not puzzle pieced out with our CG. It's just gonna go over it, and the edges are gonna work. We had all these vector generators that were all over the place. I believe that we could actually bring this here now if we wanted to, and so we could kind of generate vectors for everything once it's all been combined together. And that might give us some nice results here. It's kind of weird. We could also try the motion blur node. That's a very good node as well. So it's kind of the same thing, but sometimes it gives nice results. Let's just see what it gives us. A little bit too strong. I'll stick with the motion blur node. It's giving me a slightly better result, so I'm just going to stick with that. But it's very, very close, as you can see. Notice we optimized it because instead of motion blur being on every single layer, motion blur is now just in one place after the CG's all been combined, so it can take everything into account, basically. So we have a very slightly different result. I'm hoping really not to break the comp. Sometimes when you use the deep combine completely, like you can get a slightly different result, as you can see here. Oof. Yeah, you can get a different result, which is not good. Okay, I'm back, and I think I figured out what was going wrong, and I took some time to kind of further investigate how the deep was being used in the previous script, and basically I can explain it right here. We have a deep merge slap comp, right? And so that's all of the elements that are brought in and then used with a deep combine, and each element is being held out by the other elements, right? So if I took this one, moved it up, this one's being held up by everything else. These guys are being held out by everything else. That's what happens when you deep merge just everything together. There's no bias there. Everything, every one object is being held up by all the rest of the objects. And the deep is giving it depth, and it's sorting out which object you're going to be able to see in front of all the others, right? That is what I rebuilt initially here, which was just, I know it's sort of artificial layering because it's just helping me see where things go. But the layering process will come out once you deep merge everything together. Because on one frame, the ship might be in front of part of the smoke, and on the next frame, the ship might be behind part of the smoke. So on each frame, the depth is found out via the deep merging. And so that was what I was doing before. And here's a visual example. So you have the layer, each layer is being held out by all the other layers. So whatever the layer is, it's missing from the rest of them, and it's being held out by basically all the remaining layers. Now, when I was looking at the previous script, what I noticed was that the depth was being built, and it was being built more in a layering way. So I'll try to explain it here. The ocean was being held up by nothing. The explosion was being held up by the ocean. And the missile was being held up by the ocean and the explosion. The vehicle was being held up by ocean, explosion, and the missile. And then the white water was being held up by the ocean, explosion, missile, and vehicle. So it was kind of growing in these layers. And that is something that is not going to be the same result as this deep merge slap comp. And I'll show you why. So here, when we just completely slap everything together and let the deep merge sort out which one it's going to show you, you get this result here. I'll use this frame because it's a good frame to go off based off this fire. Now I'm matching that result basically with the other pass. I'm basically matching that result right here, which you can see if I switch it. So there was a little bit of there was a time offset on the smoke, and I think we filled some of the holes in this with some of these grades. So there's some grades, some missile roto and a little bit of alpha grade on this explosion, which is why we get this little difference here, which is very positive, and that's a good difference to have, I think. So that's the difference there, but you can see that the layering basically is staying the same in these kind of regions, especially the smoke. Now let's look at the result when we merge everything in the way that this is describing, which is the ocean's held up by nothing, and then they're basically progressively being held up by some more things each time the layer goes deeper. Now we get this result here, which I can show back and forth. And at first, it does look better in some areas, right? It does look better, and in other areas it looks worse. Like in these regions, maybe with the cylinder here or whatever the engine is, maybe this is not what we want, or maybe it is. So it's a bit hard to tell. I would say let's just call this the creative way to deep combine. It's not really authentically deep combined because the deep would sort itself out. And essentially what we're doing here is we're putting a bias. We're putting a bias on the alpha channel by, we're saying, oh, the explosion's only supposed to be held out by the ocean and not by the missile and not by the vehicle. And the missile is only supposed to be held out by everything above that, which is the ocean explosion. So we're missing some elements that we're holding each other off, but the white water, for example, is held up by everything else. So it's quite interesting. And that is how the script, essentially, this little setup here, is how the previous script was being set up with the layering. And so I've recreated that, and I can kind of go into that. Basically, let's take this example, for example, here. So the explosion was being held up by the ocean, so I have a deep holdout. And then I went straight to deep to image, and that alpha channel I just shuffled into explosion. So I'm kind of doing the same thing that I was doing in this setup with the shuffles and then pulling everything out at the end, except I'm sort of defining each layer here. So I have ocean, explosion, I have missile acid and missile smoke, and so those are being held out only by the explosion in the ocean, for example. And so I'm basically making a list of these, and I have an over here because in the previous comp, an over was used because once it's held out, you can kind of over that. I would say that it's deviating from the deep approach, and like you can see there, maybe some of the results were better, so you could call it a creative decision that you were doing that, but certainly it's deviating from how the deep is supposed to be, cutting everything else out by each other. But you can see I'm gathering like a list of alpha channels, just like I was in the other script. See the explosion and everything, and then this over is helping me build that up because I can no longer deep combine it. There's no way to do this method like this because the deep holdouts, like I was saying before, the deep holdouts, it figures out where all the depth is by itself. So you can't really put a bias on it, right? You can't really say like, oh, but I want this one to only be held out by the other ones because we've added it to the scene already. And so, so you need to end up doing this 2D comp with disjoint overs or overs. So yeah, like I said, you can do it. If I take the result of that and I compare it to the result of the outputted comp, actually it's quite similar. Now I get some lens distortion and stuff, so maybe I can find a frame. So here's a frame that's pretty similar. And yeah, we're getting some similar layering there. So essentially I've recreated what was going on in the original script, but we can still use this deep holdout, deep combine layer. So I'm just basically switching how it's being done, either merging everything together in deep or merging everything together kind of in 2D, but by still keeping the alpha channels with me. So I have the pre-render here, and that is then going to be propagated throughout my script. So I've replaced where the deep was being used in the script by shuffling out the alpha that I need. And what I am doing is, depending, I can show you right here, I have a clone stamp of that switch up at the top. So when I switch this, with a normal deep, if everything is held out by each other like the puzzle pieces, you need to use the disjoint over. And if everything is just over, then you need to use a regular over, merge over. So depending on which one of the deep combined renders I was using, I need to switch the result. So it's a little bit ugly, but maybe I could clean up the script. I could either leave it in like this, or I could clean up the script so it's either one or the other. But yeah, you need to change from disjoint over to over depending on the method that you're using. Disjoint over is for the puzzle pieces to lock into place and the edges to not having a little edge fringe around it. And the overs are just, yeah, layering on top of each other. So when I had the deep output combined before, I went around and I replaced all of the places where the deep was originally being used, for example, in the explosion. So there was already a deep there, like pumping the alpha in, and I just replaced it. This is actually not the best place to place the deep combine, though, because it is inside of the module. So that means we have a dependency issue. So the module is dependent on the deep combine. So say I get a replacement render for the explosion and I replace it, that means I would need to render the deep combine again. And wherever my deep combine was located, I would need to re-render them if they were located inside of those modules. So I'd have to like pre-render everything again. When in reality, you don't really need to do that because I didn't do any color changes to any of those modules. So we want to remove the dependency of the deep combine from inside the module to outside the module. So basically I would pull this out here and I would want to move it after where I do the pre-comp. So say I have a pre-comp here. So I'd move it here. And in this case, I think I would need to unpremult all channels again. So I'll just do that. So I want to inject or swap out my alpha after the pre-render. And these modules really should not have any type of alpha change in them when I'm talking about CG. So you can consider these like AOV layer set models or AOV trees. All it is really a color correction at the end of the day. So you're just, changing masks and adding shadows and highlights and doing lots of complicated color corrections, but the outgoing alpha channel should be the same as the ingoing alpha channel. So we actually want to preserve that. So I think I did kind of break that by taking out that deep alpha. So I'll just put that in here and I'll make a dot. So the alpha channel is now being pumped around in outgoing, so it's not changing. I think I need to add a premult. So the alpha channel in the module is gonna stay the same. So we're doing no layering changes or anything inside of the module itself. And then here we'll just render this again. So we have our pre-render, and this should not change at all anything in the alpha. And actually it should still be the incoming alpha going in. So if I take a look, it is still the ingoing alpha, right? So whatever came in has not come out as the same alpha channel. And so we would want to do our deep combine afterwards. And then this is where the alpha gets swapped out, right? So we have this change in the alpha here. And that means I could make some color changes here and then pre-render, and I'm not worrying about like how the alpha changed, or vice versa. I could go make a change over to my deep combine, and then I would not need to re-render this explosion because the color didn't change. So then there's no point to do that. And this could be saving you a lot of time in production because you know, you might do a change to the deep, but then you don't have to go re-render like 4, 5, 6 modules and spend, you know, a bunch of minutes rendering those again when you really don't need to, if you're just messing with the depth changes and stuff, or if you just get a CG update. So say the ocean changed, so there's a new simulation or something, then it would change the deep, which means I would re-render my deep combine, and then I would reopen this pre-comp, and then we pre-render just the ocean, and then I wouldn't need to pre-render any of the other things in my script, and it would save a bunch of render time. So I'm gonna go and pull all of these deep combines out of the modules and put them after the pre-render to release the dependency of them. In this layer, we actually have a deep alpha for the missile and the missile smoke. So I think instead of pre-rendering them all together, we're just gonna make 2 pre-renders basically. And because it's just a couple read nodes over and over each other, we're not really losing any time. So in that way, we can just go here and make it follow our rule of not having any of the modules have the deep combined inside of them. So here's my script with everything pre-comped, and you can see that they're ending below all the modules. And yeah, if you just had a render, for example, you would just open this up and then re-render, so make it live again, render it, and then it would go back to everything being pre-comped, and all of my deep combines are located after all of the pre-renders, saving some optimization there. And at the very end of the comp, I did a pre-render of my result versus the other result, and there's a little bit of change. I think it's mostly because of the motion blur. I just did one motion blur right at the end versus every single layer because, again, that would mess up the relationship between each edge because they're all hollow from each other. But I'm pretty happy with this result. It is, you know, very, very close to the original. It's just a slight variation of it. You can see everything's looking pretty much the same. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm gonna call this one successfully rebuilt, I suppose, with the deep. Especially in frames like this without much motion blur, you can see it's very, very similar. So there's a big difference though. Now I'm back in the old script, and I want to show you the difference between performance of live deep versus when we have the deep pre-rendered and only carrying those alpha holdouts that we need. And essentially, we're working now in the new setup, we're working only in 2D. And Nuke loves 2D. Nuke hates deep, hates live deep. It loves just 2D. It can do the calculations very quick. Deep is very heavy. It's bringing from the network a lot of data, a lot of file size, and also just the amount of data that it needs to carry within each pixel. Because it's not just the front-facing pixel. It's carrying a lot of that depth data back, multiple samples of it. So every calculation is just very heavy, especially for using it all over our script. And I just want to demonstrate this by, I'm in the old script now. This is the version 1 with all the stamps just quickly replaced. But I'm going to go to the very bottom of the script. Let's go to another frame. So here's another frame, and yeah, it's kind of heavy to preview. It's kind of heavy to preview. It was doing some weird stuff and not really allowing me to view things very good. I think it's taken about maybe 5-10 seconds to preview stuff, which before it was calculating quite a bit. It could have just been my cache, I suppose. If I look at the end of the CG tree, the CG branch here, I'll see. We can see it kind of lagging a little bit. It's a little bit slow. It has to do all those deep calculations. Here we go. So let me go back to the other script. This is my other script, and let's see how long it takes. You can see it's almost playing 1 second or 2 seconds a frame being loaded, gaining a lot of speed by working only in 2D. And essentially, if I had to say the difference between the two setups, the whole deep combine and then using the alpha holdouts, basically all of my layering decisions are made up here. They're made up in this deep combine. So the layering is locked into place. It's pre-rendered, locked into place. We've decided what should be in front with alpha changes or with roto shapes or something like that. So even this like bias could be considered us playing around with how much of the layer that we want to see. And once that's there, we lock it in, and then we just use the alphas everywhere else. I actually think it's much quicker because if we're using one place to decide our layer order, and then the rest of this comp script is deciding our colors, our glows, our masks, all that kind of stuff, all in the 2D world. So we're kind of separating the layer order, the depth, the way that it's assembled, I guess, and then we're doing all the color corrections somewhere else. And so I can make some decisions on the fly. Like, let's say I go to this frame here, and I say, you know, I kind of want that smoke to be a little bit more in front. Well, I can take this layer here, and if I make a deep transform, I can make some decisions like bringing this forward in Z. You see what I mean? So I could make some decisions here and animate that or something. And then I basically am locking that into place. So I'm locking that in once I pre-render. But if I were trying to do that within my bigger script, so if I were trying to do that in this other script, I would have to wait a long time to get visual feedback because everything is kind of tied together. And, you know, I don't need to look at all the color corrections in order to determine my order of depth of my deep passes. With deep renders, I would say as a rule of thumb, you really want to escape deep as fast as you can. So do your deep combines and then never work with it again until you get a render change, or possibly you need to change a little bit of the ordering with the deep transform or something like that. There are, of course, occasions where you do need to keep the deep live, which would be a large amount of defocus, and it needs to know what the background looks like to get the right bokeh. But for a lot of deep, it's easier just to deep combine it here. The whole comp right now, besides the deep, is live, and that's giving me a lot of visual feedback, and I don't need to wait. I don't need to wait for the feedback to calculate all the deep, because you only need to calculate the deep one time. It's the heaviest thing, and it's the least likely thing to change, essentially. Once you've figured out the depth order, it's the least thing that is going to have a change. All the rest of the stuff is going to change. The shadows, the color, the highlights, the glows, all that stuff is going to change more often than the deep will. So I'm going to save this script as I think the level 5 version, and the level 5 is also just like optimizing the script for deep workflow. I could end the video here with the level 5 deep workflow converted over to the 2D and deep holdout mats solution there. But I think I'm going to go one more level deep, and I'm going to see if I can organize this a bit more inside of this and show another technique of basically stamps being used within a module like this. So maybe giving us a little bit more clarity on some of the stuff that's going on within each module. It's sort of converting my thought process, where essentially going to work in an RGBA format and then just take some stamps around where we need stuff like position pass, or we need stuff like Z depth or something. And it's so that none of the channels that we're using are hidden underneath, and we're going to expose it in the node graph to show like, okay, now I'm using depth, now I'm using P somewhere, now I'm using this alpha somewhere else. Possibly get a little bit more visual clarity out of some of that stuff using stamps as well. This is acting as a bounds. So especially with CG renders, you could make masks. You could make masks and stamps that go inside of this group. So the anchors, the start point, the parent of the stamp could be at the top of this. Like you could have a bunch of cryptomats or a bunch of masks from P or something like that. And basically, as long as those stamps are all going within this module and not outside of it, it's like self-contained stamps within this thing. So you basically have an input, which is our render, and then you might have stamps that are exploding that, because there's actually hidden inputs in this render. I mean, we have a layer contact sheet here, right? So this is actually, even though it's one thing, it's multiple layers. So we might want to explode those layers out and use them in different places, especially the position pass or the normals or something like that. So we could explode that out into the node graph as long as it's contained within this module. And once it's in the module, and as long as none of that is being used in other places in our script, we can pre-render that. Maybe we take the stuff that we need to with it, like this position pass, and we pre-render that, and then we still have the ability to speed up our workflow by pre-rendering most of it and then using a pass or two outside of it for other things. Okay, so I still think that when we zoom in here, we don't fully know where things are coming from and where things are. It does say position here, and this is clearly coming from here. But when it just depends on where you're zoomed into. You don't really know, what things are coming from, like this blur. Like if I'm just zoomed in here, and that's how close I am, I don't know where these are coming from. And to me, to go hunt for those things and to figure out, okay, this one's coming here, this one's coming here, what was this plugged into? Okay, it's plugged into the main one. I understand why it's being done. I'm going to try to, instead of hiding the inputs into the pipes, I'm going to try to expose the things that we're using in a node graph way, so that my entire comp is in RGBA, and for the masks we're just pulling stamps around and using those where needed. So I'm gonna use a little bit more space here, and clearly this is broken up into some some render passes here. So we have some, I don't think they're light groups, they're definitely material AOVs, I think, some reflections, and this is transmission, so that's like a refraction or something. So these are our four main kind of areas, and all the rest of the stuff. So if I can, like, this is a pipe, this is a pipe, this is a layer, and this is a layer, and there almost should only be four of them because they're four layers and then they merge together. But we have many other pipes around because we need to basically we need to carry all that information with us. So there's two ways that we could do this. We could put a stamp right here, and we could call this like ocean on pre-mult or something. So we could do this, and wherever we're using P, we could just shuffle out P, or we could plug it in here like this, either or. So I like to be very specific about what I'm doing. So here I might plug that into the P or something. But you could also just plug in just that stamp that is unpremulted. So we could just have one stamp anchor, some parent stamp that is going to bring all of the channels with us, and then we shuffle out what we need. But actually, I think having just kind of a small setup that is going to bring some of the channels with us could be beneficial and maybe give us a little bit more clarity. So for example, I'm just going to make one now with just the position pass. So I'll call it P. Right? So that's the name of our layer, and we're going to shuffle that out actually so that it's there, P. Now what this gives us is a really nice way to quickly view what the position pass looked like without changing our viewer. So we can just click out, what was that P again? Okay, there. Another one could be normals, right? So we could be basing this on normals. I'll just go back here. So then this one might be N. So I might have, this might be built into my my AOV setup, where these are always at the top and it's always grabbing these and I don't need to set it up again. But I'm just setting it up once here to show you. And we're gonna take this P, and wherever we're using P, we're going to put that in there. It's not necessarily using this combined diffuse, right? It looks like it needs to come from the combined diffuse, but it doesn't. It's only using P. So these hue keyers are actually using the glossy reflection. I wouldn't plug it into the top there just for some more clarity, but this is actually using the pass information. So the problem with the pipes is you don't know which one's actually using the RGBA pass information or which one is only a pipe to be used for the utility passes like P and Z and N. So yeah, I think this gains a little bit more clarity in the sense that yeah, this is a position pass being used. So here we have this whole section here that's piping down is only so that we can pull out the P pass, and it looks like the depth pass too. So I'm actually going to make another stamp for the Z pass. And here we have the merge of all of these, which is okay. I would not want to have all these hidden inputs, so I'll just go up ahead and do this. What we could do quite simply is take all of these, copy, paste, click L so they all line up. We don't really care about the order. So we'll call that like combined beauty or something. It was different from the other beauty. Otherwise, I would just use the RGBA from up there, but we'll call this combined beauty. I think this was trying to catch differences between the passes and the beauty and add it back. So we have here combined beauty layers minus the ocean on pre-mult, and that's giving you the beauty difference. Okay, let's keep going with this. Wherever I can, I'm going to try to keep the masks on the right side. I really want things to be where they're close together. So I want to see things that are being used, like this whole section here is creating its own mask. So all these things are kind of little tiny modules that are being used together. So something like this, I think, could remain. It's kind of a little bit obvious. This one kind of goes up here, but I wouldn't fuss too much about something like this because they're all still pretty individual or very, very close to the point where I don't need to like zoom out really far and go look for something, right? I can see, okay, this was being used here and then brought down and being used somewhere else. So I wouldn't like make a stamp for this. You have to kind of gain a little bit of a feeling for it because, you know, it might be too far away and somebody wants to make a stamp there, but basically you would need to name it an individual thing, and the more individualistic you name it, probably the more unclear it gets because somebody might not know where that mask name was coming from, but they do know where P is coming from and they do know where depth is coming from. So that is why those kind of universal names are bring more clarity because it's not a custom made mask for position pass. Sometimes what I like to do as well is instead of ocean on pre-mult, I could just say RGBA. And if that could be a little bit clearer. So I might have this kind of setup here where I'm pulling out the things that will be used in the script. One of the benefits of that, I think it's a benefit, is that I can select this. Now I see, okay, these are all the locations I was using the position pass in. And I think that's a pretty nice feature, and a nice, like, where was I using my depth? Okay, I'm gonna select the depth, select that. I'm using it mostly down here in this region. So it's helping us find the places, otherwise we have to go hunt and look for the stuff again, right? And I would even do this, because it doesn't harm us at all it doesn't harm us to just use multiple stamps. So we can even consolidate it a tiny bit more. Something like this probably is fine because it's all branching out and coming back in. But yeah, we can let them be individual places that it's being used. So whenever I'm doing a CG renders as well, I give myself a little bit more space at the top kind of area. This one here, whatever this mask is, this is for the waves or the splash. We can call that splash, something splash. So this kind of region here, it's being used in multiple places, which is totally fine. I might promote that, so I might promote that to an asset, just like I would do that. I would do that in my Nuke script. If I was using a roto multiple places, I would go and promote that to a mask section. So I'll show you what I mean. So imagine that this whole backdrop was its own Nuke script, and I'm sort of treating it the same way, where I'm saying this is my masks. And I have this big backdrop here, and this is going to help me keep track of masks that I'm using in many places. So usually I'll give it, I mean, this makes a lot of sense on characters or something like nose or ears or mouth, you know. Here it's a little bit vague. We can call this like splash Y, or yeah, splash Y sounds good. I would say if you're using something just one time, don't do this. Just use it wherever that specific part is. It's when we duplicate it around, and you can see we can alleviate some of this confusion with the line. So if I'm in here, we don't know where that mask came from. But if we say splash Y, we can start cleaning some of this up. So we can see, we can even rearrange this thing. So it's the sky reflection overed with splash Y. The only thing that we don't know is what is splash Y, but at least we see where it comes from, and we can go investigate, like, okay, this is where splash Y is, and if we want to change it, we just have one place that we're going to change that. Otherwise, we might have to go look for it in our setup, where was it, and then we'll change it, and then we're limited by the space that we have in the setup. Here we have some space that we could add more masks to it, we could go in and add more shapes to it, and expand upon it. So this one, I think I would leave it. I would leave it because it comes from that branch. It comes from that branch, and I have the feeling like instead of bringing that branch anywhere else besides where it is branched out, because these things are using illuminance keys that are illuminance key of what is required from that layer, it's better just to keep it where it is, and then to bring that other places. And I think that might gain clarity of, okay, this is coming from that specific branch, if that makes sense. I think I would definitely leave that alone. But then we have this one, which is just the position pass, and this one we could promote, and we have to figure out what this one is now. So if I'm looking around, here we go. We have another splash. So I'll just call that left splash. Yeah, so some of these are a little ambiguous as to what they could be named, but you know, sometimes it's much clearer. So you can see here we can also gain some clarity. We have the mask, and it's using left splash. We'll change that to passes combined. Maybe that'll make a little bit more sense of what it's trying to achieve. It's like a pass check. So I'm pretty satisfied with the cleanup of this little module here, and I know it. Of course, it's a mess if you select it, because you're not supposed to select it. You're just supposed to have this zoom level of everything here. So even though I'm zoomed really closely into the node graph, I can still see where everything is going. And even this one, well, at least it's not too far away. I can see that this is going over here, and it's actually connected to this branch. So it requires this direct glossy reflection first because of all the keys that are being done from it. So we've gotten rid of a lot of the horizontal lines, and we've put the things where we're very close to where they're being used. and we can see how many times is this splash being used. It's being used in those 4 areas there. How many times is this splash being used? It's being used in those 3 spots there. And so we're having this level of tidiness, but we're still having a lot of clarity of where things are coming from, where they're going, what it is. With properly named titles or stamps, you can very clearly see like eyes, mouth, teeth, whatever. Especially with cryptomats or something like that, where it's not so obvious what it is that you have made, the mask. So just like in coding, variable names are a big thing. You need to think about what the things are being named so that it becomes very obvious. You might put mask underscore this or something alpha. For me, I think it's makes a little sense that it's in the mask region and it's called left splash, so it's a mask of the left splash. So I'll switch back and forth between the old setup, which is this one here, which is, like I said, very readable. I don't think there's a huge issue here. And then this is the new setup where I guess we can see a little bit more clearly where those bigger branches are. So these 4 individual branches here that are being merged together, and then some color corrections down here, where I think it was a little bit cluttered in some of these areas and a little bit locked into place. Like if I needed more color corrections here, maybe I need more space on this particular one, and I could add more grade nodes here, right? So maybe I need to do this, spread those out, or whatever I need to do. Whereas before you're kind of locked into wherever this line is, and then you need to like push things around, and then the lines get not so straight. And so this is kind of individualizing some of our branches here. So it's allowing us a little bit of freedom of movement of some things as well. So all these things don't need to be exactly in line with each other anymore. This one could be way up here, for example, right? And then this could be up here. This could be up here. So it's allowing us to kind of customize a little bit per branch where we can, if that's how we want to visualize this. So these could go up here as well. Maybe we want to leave a little bit space for that merge, but it's giving us a little bit of clarity. I could even bring this whole thing up here like that. So we can see there's a lot of stuff going on at the tops of those branches, and that leaves some space for this to be very visual. That okay, it just went in and we merged those 2 branches together, and then this whole section is some color correction. We can see that is affecting both of those upper branches there. And this is just my opinion at this point. You know, if you don't think it looks more clear, if you think it looks unclear, that's a valid opinion. Just for me, it looked a little bit more clear, and I could see, okay, individual branches where they're merging in, and all the masks, again, you can see kind of where they're going and where they're being used. And there are still a couple horizontal lines, but they're close enough to each other that I feel like they don't need to go anywhere else. And also, they were being generated from that branch. So these keyers are being generated from the branch, so they belong close to the branch, I think, which makes sense. Yeah, so I would say that this is pretty tidy. Of course, you know, if this is more how you're used to look, it's still pretty clear that this is the spine, because that's where most of the stuff is plugging in. But here, I think it's even more obvious because most of the stuff is being plugged in there. It's really just a matter of taste. I mean, you have an area here for all your masks that you can go and make more masks and promote them up to that area, and then make stamps wherever you need to use that. If you know that you're going to use that over and over and over again, you can go ahead and put that up there. Here are my most common types of passes that are now propagated in other places. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention is that this says P. When you look at it, it's very visual what it is. So you can quickly look at your depth pass, or that's the mat. But you can quickly look at your alphas and say, okay, this is what that is. Especially on something like position. Now, I would probably even set it up so that all of these removed all of those passes in there, in case I'm trying to transform stuff around, or I'm trying to do a blur on everything, in case I don't want to do all channels. So I would maybe put a remove node. And then we really are keeping RGBA, so we're really making sure that that pass is just the position that I'm bringing around, and not the entire rest of that. Because when you do things like transformations, you're actually transporting all of the channels with you, right? You're transporting everything. And that can be more processing intensive. So it's better just to do things with RGBA whenever you can, because it's a little bit more optimized than it is to try to do everything all at once. Especially with blurs, blurring all channels or exponentially blurring all channels, stuff like that can get really out of hand quickly. All of the other branches are pretty clean. I don't see any need to optimize this any further here. The one thing is maybe I would also make position pass for this vehicle. So I could go, and with a stamp, it could be named the same thing, but it won't be that confusing. You don't have to name it position vehicle. You can just name it P. The stamp, even though it's the same name as the other one, it actually has an individual ID, which is this here. And this ID, this hash, is very customized. So this P is not going to be confused with the other one. It's going to know exactly where to go. It can never be disconnected. It's this here on the advanced reconnection, it actually tells you where it's going to go, which is the name of this this node. So even though they're both named P, they won't get confused. So here we have some keyer or something, which is fine because that's keying from the actual branch. Same thing with here. This is keying from the actual branch, which is all good. Now, this is very important with this whole module system. Whatever anchor, which is the parent, whatever anchor is created within the module should not escape the module. With a couple exceptions. One of the exceptions being we were using this branch from the explosion flames, and this was being used somewhere else as well. It was being used up here. It was being used there anyways. But it might be dangerous to do this if you're gonna plan to delete this. So it might be better to take this explosion flames, for example, and I'll just do an example here. It might be better to take this and to make a shuffle. So it could be, and we're trying to use the RGB of that. So it might actually be a wiser decision to make something called explosion flames. So if I say explosion flames, and then I click auto RGBA, that's red, green, blue, alpha. So now I have that. I need to make sure to check red, green, blue, alpha from the bottom here. So this is basically moving my red, green, blue also into explosion flames. So when I go shuffle out explosion flames, yeah, it shows me the same result, right? So in this copy node, I'm going to set this to none. I'm going to copy in explosion flames, and now this is in my main branch here, which will be pre-rendered. And I might, what I might do then is go to this explosion comp, and then I might shuffle out my explosion flames. If it doesn't, I think this needs to be all channels. I need to keep it here. That's what it was. So I keep it here, boom. So now that was a filter getting rid of all the channels, but I want to keep that one for later. So now I can find that in the list, explosion flames. So if I copy this and I take that up here, and I'm going to replace that, right? So what is this doing actually? It's pretty much the same result. It looks exactly the same. What it's doing is that when I pre-render this, if I were to pre-render this right now, it's one frame. So I have this explosion now pre-rendered with some additional channels that it's carrying. If I do this, if I were to delete this from my script completely, so I'm just gonna delete it. This explosion that was being used from it is still intact. And that's because I chose to keep it with me, and then I could delete it from my script if I wanted to, if that happened, right? So that's very important. That's called funneling. It's funneling the channels that you're gonna keep for later, and then when you do the pre-comp, it's not live later, right? So that is a wiser decision, a more optimized way to do it. And so you can still see where it's going. It's going over here, was being used. So there's a few places that explosion was being used, but that's okay because the stamps that were created inside of that module are not going flying somewhere else. So it's actually much safer to do something like that. And when you pre-comp, it's reading from the pre-comp. It's not reading from a very heavy live CG render. It's reading from just this pass here with a couple passes. So the input-output read-in time is going to be much faster as well when it's pre-comped. And you're going to pre-comp it and then wonder, oh, why is that thing still slow? Why is my script still slow? And it was because it might have been accessing live information from inside the module that was supposed to be pre-comped, right? So that is just a good way to think about these things. Is when you create a stamp, it could go within it. I'll select mine as an example. So we can see that there's multiple things coming in, which is fine. Just like a group node, how there's multiple things coming into a group node, that's great. And then there's only one output. So the output should only be the actual output that you're going to pre-comp. It should not be an additional stamp that's flying out somewhere else. So multiple inputs is okay. Multiple outputs from your module is usually frowned upon. So that about ends it for the refactoring. This here is my final script. So this was our starting point of our script that was provided to us. And yeah, all the read nodes were exactly where they were being used. All the assets were being used. So the very first level that we did is that we took all the assets that we were being used in the script. We moved them to the top of our script and then made a stamp for them and just replaced where it was being used with that stamp. So that was step one. That was just bringing our assets to the top so it's all in one big asset bin at the top and then propagating it. The level 2 script was that some of those assets were then being piped around, and instead of piping things around, what we did is we just copied that child stamp and we put it to where the ends of those pipes were so that they were being used in their correct places in the script. So we can see that multiple things are being used, and it got rid of a lot of those pipes because the pipes were just bringing them around when we could just copy paste directly that stamp to where it's being used. So that was level 2. And level 3 is that we just straightened out some of these branches. So back in level 2, we had these two that were next to each other, but they were being merged. So what we did is we organized a little bit the branches so that they were on top of each other, so that these were very clearly defined modules that we can turn off the mergers for each of the branches, and that there's no like one hero one at the very top. They're all individual branches that are being merged together. So that was the organization step on step 3. On step 4, we simply went around, and this is a bit of a small step, but we just labeled everything. So we defined our modules. We defined our branches, the assets, the bigger assets that are being used for each branch. And we just provided a little bit more clarity between the two scripts here. So that's 3 and 4, very baby step, but it's helping us to define where everything is. So the difference between level 4 and 5 is we removed any of the live deep from our script. We took all the deep and we layered it at the top using a deep combine. So we figured out how the layering should go with some deep assets at the very top, and we are then pre-rendering that into 2D, and we're propagating that alpha channel all over our script where it's needed. So each branch has its own alpha, and then all of that gets combined together. And so it's basically decoupling each branch with its deep. We're doing the deep and figuring out all of our layering at the top, and that provides us with some speed and flexibility. And it makes the whole script run a lot faster because we're just doing things in 2D now with alpha channels. And all of our layering, if we need to adjust it, it's at the top. If we get a new render, we can re-render the deep, because the deep is something that we don't really touch very often. After the layering has been established, that's not usually the thing that you're going to get a lot of notes on. You're going to get notes on color and glows and other things like that. So yeah, that it's separating those things out, and in each of those little spots, we're able to work a lot faster. And finally, level 6 was changing some of our modules. So some of our branches had, you could think of it like its own Nuke script inside. So we created extra stamps inside at the top that we propagated around, and that got rid of some of these horizontal branches and cleared things up a tiny bit more. And we also learned that we should not take a stamp or any type of a pipe from within one of those modules outside of it. So if we want to store that, we have to pump it into a channel so that after we pre-render that module, we can then still use that in other places in our script in case that module gets deleted or something happens to it. So if we did pre-render it, we don't want to still be accessing live things from the modules. So we want the things that we keep, we want to define them, and then we want to render them and use a stamp maybe to bring them up to where we're needed, but to take advantage of the fact that we can pre-comp those things. So pre-rendering is a big necessity, and we don't want to be accidentally still looking at live information from heavy CG renders when we're doing that. So that was the final step, is cleaning up things that were inside of those modules that are defined by those backdrops there. So again, just for a bigger overview, this is the script that we started with. Perfectly reasonable script. I think it has a lot of clarity already. It's not like a joke of a script or a complete mess or anything. I wanted to do an honest comparison of a script that was already looking very, very good and very structured. And mostly it's a stamps script conversion with also a deep workflow conversion that is also taking advantage of stamps, but I'm sure it could be done with a pipe system. So a little bit of two kind of demonstrations going on. And what we gained is a lot of speed, maybe some clarity with the script, and just comparing the different workflows. I don't know if people will disagree with me, but I certainly don't think we lost any clarity with the script. I want to demonstrate that this is a bird's eye view of this thing. And I think where it really comes in handy is if we zoom in here. So we just kind of see pipes that are going off the screen. I do think it's a little bit clearer where things are going. We can see that position is being used here, and some masks are being used there, and so we would need to go chase those things to go figure out where that was going. Whereas here we can see, okay, here's my sky background, here's my position and my depth, and it's being used in multiple places. Yeah, I know this was a very long series. It was more kind of like comp alongside me, and we're figuring out these different levels together. I went to the script pretty blind, so I looked at it for a couple minutes before. I certainly had to figure out a lot of things. I definitely ran into some troubleshooting issues with the deep. Yeah, I hope this video is going to kind of highlight or shed some light on an alternative way to work with the stamps and how it doesn't take away from any workflow. It just depends on how you're using this tool, right? And of course, if we select everything, it's going to look like a mess, but it's not really a mess because you're not supposed to select everything. If we select some things, we can see exactly where they come from, which is great. And that's our asset. We can, more importantly, perhaps, we can start to see where our assets are being used in our script. So if we start selecting some of these things, here we go here, and we can see where they're being used. And that's giving us even more clarity, because with a pipe system, we would have to go and figure out where things are and follow the pipes down. And this is telling us exactly where things are being used, which is really cool. So I will provide all of those levels of Nuke scripts so you can see like step by step how we were refactoring, reorganizing, renaming stuff, and kind of moving them around to be a little bit more clear. Definitely have stamps installed, I would say, if you're going to try to open this up and take a look. And yeah, it was fun. I really would like to do more of these, honestly. And thanks so much to Shahid for giving me this Nuke script and these assets to play around with. I had a lot of fun. It's a really cool shot. I think you did a great job comping it. So yeah, this is maybe provides you with a little bit of insight about how I think about the organization of my comps. And maybe makes you think about how you might reorganize your comps, or what a good comp might look like to you, and see which one of those steps that you agree with and which ones you don't. So yeah, I thought it was really cool. And thank you again to Shahid. Go check out his channel at VFX SHOWDOWN. I think it's a great channel. I think he's a wonderful compositor. So thanks a lot. And yeah, I'll see you in the next time.